And now let's go back to CBS News legal contributor Jessica Levinson on the breakdown of the justice's decision in this ruling. Jessica, sorry we lost you there, but I kind of want to get more information from you about how the justices ruled when it came to this tariff issue.
This is such an important question because I think we tend to believe that when I get on air to talk to you about breaking news and it's a really big case, that the division will be 6-3 along ideological lines.
Yes.
And that's not what we saw today. I think it's important to remember that this really was a question about constitutional powers and interpretation of a statute. And we have a 6-3 decision with all the liberals joining some conservatives. And we see that graphic on the screen shows it better than I could explain. But we have two of the president's appointees, Justice Barrett and Justice Gorsuch, joining with the majority to say he doesn't have the power to do this. And I think it's important to remember that there is a difference between a conservative Supreme Court's view of the president's power over the executive branch, where I think the court believes that the president has a lot of power, versus the court's opinion of any president's power over this area, which is really an area generally left to Congress, an area talking about taxing and regulating commerce. And so I think what we have here, again, is a decision where the justices, yes, huge implications politically, but they're doing something different. They're looking at the Constitution, they're looking at this 1970s era statute, and they're saying, what power does any president get? And that's how you have this breakdown.
And Jessica, I want to ask this because we were speaking with Jan Crawford earlier, and she had said, you know, just from the arguments last year, it almost seemed like there was an indication that the justices would rule this way. But from your experience, I'm sure that's not the case. They could argue and ask lawyers certain questions, and then when it comes time to rule, they rule a different direction, right?
Well, from my experience, Jan Crawford is always right on this, but absolutely, it is the case that it's difficult to predict based on oral arguments. I will, however, say that I listened to the oral arguments, then I read the transcripts because I knew this moment between us was coming, and I do think that you heard particularly Chief Justice John Roberts, particularly Justice Barrett, really say over and over again a version of, have we ever seen a president use this particular statute for this purpose? Justice Gorsuch also was worried about something that he called the one-way ratchet theory, where he was worried if we give Congress's power to the president now, how can Congress ever claw it back? And that's where I think you ultimately get this breakdown. You're absolutely right that it makes all of us feel very, smart and justified that, yes, I thought they were going to strike down the tariffs. It doesn't always go that way. Sometimes I say I have an omelet, not just egg on my face. This time we were right.
So in their ruling, I believe the justices did not talk about what comes next and how, these small businesses or big businesses, all of them all together, how they're going to get their money back. Is that surprising? Is that something we should have expected to come from them?
No, I think at this point, what we're seeing is that it will go back to the trade court, the International Trade Court. And I apologize if I misheard. There was a little glitch on the audio, but it will go back to the trade court and there'll be a determination really about what the remedy is. So I don't think it's surprising that the court didn't go through and say, and now here's how you implement it. The court basically said, and now we've made our pronouncement about presidential power. Now, the lower courts, again, the specialized court, is going to sort out the specific remedy. It doesn't mean that the court should have. It meant that it just shows us that the court did not. And I mean, I'm going to say what everybody knows and has said. This is going to be a mess in terms of people trying to get back the money that they paid in these tariffs. But whether or not something is a mess, that's not the question for the court. The question for the court is whether or not it's constitutional and legal.
So I suppose the question or the topic of tariffs, that's not over because there are other laws or other ways for the president to impose tariffs, right?
Oh, absolutely. There are other laws. I'm thinking of two in particular that give the president the power to impose tariffs, particularly when there has been a conclusion that there's a national security issue. Now, why didn't the president use those laws when it came to these reciprocal tariffs? And I think because, as I read them briefly, they wouldn't give the president this power, this broad power. And the president wanted to go bigger and bolder. And so this is not a ruling that says presidents never have the power to impose tariffs. This is a ruling that says not under this particular statute. So essentially, if the president wants to try again, he can look to the much more typical statutes where they have been used by presidents to impose tariffs and try and impose what, in my view, would be narrower tariffs. It's not what he wants as a policy matter, but I think it's what he and any president are limited to as a legal matter.
Okay, Jessica Levinson, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate it.